Welcome to another episode of Mr. Therapist and the Counselor podcast, where we discuss mental health and addiction recovery topics. And Jesse always laughs at my intro. I don't know why.
He's done screws up all the time. Keep going, man. Keep
I don't
going.
screw it. I never screwed it up in a while.
All right. Maybe I'm sorry. You don't screw it up all the time. I'll take that back.
And today we have a special guest. We have Will Nephew with us. Will has been working in the mental health field for 10 years, since 2016. His company, Moving Melodies, focuses on therapeutic songwriting for clients struggling with mental health and addiction. How you doing, Will?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, dude. We've been taking a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast, and you are actually our first guest, I feel, for like our season.
Quite a while.
Season 2.
I'm honored.
Yeah, it's been a minute since we've actually talked to another human being besides ourselves, so this is exciting. So I don't know if I know how to do it. So, Will, what was the first concert you ever went to?
Blink 182
Yeah.
in probably 1994.
94?
Something.
Okay.
I think I was not a driving age, and I got dropped off by my mom, and it was the sweatiest, loudest, craziest experience I've ever been to. But
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that like had you already like picked up a guitar? Had you learned were you playing music like at school? Was there like
No, I was not. I loved music, since I first started hearing music, and I got into bands, pop punk. Blink was a San Diego band. I'm from San Diego.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did you go see him at Soma or anything like that?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
The
nice.
original
Okay.
Soma, yeah.
Yeah, very cool, very cool.
Yeah. But no, I didn't actually pick up the guitar until I was probably 16, and it was a buddy of mine had a guitar and a drum set at his house, and I went over after school, and he showed me a couple chords in drop D, which is you only have to play with one finger, and it was Smoke on the Water, and he played drums. And it was actually in that connection, because my parents always had a guitar, but I don't know, it just didn't click that I love music, but I somehow didn't have that spark to create it. But when I was playing with my friend, it was like, well, this is amazing. I think it was that connection that, we're playing together, and it wasn't that hard. So I literally ran home, dusted off their guitar, and I never put it down. I took it everywhere with me, even in the bathroom.
Yeah. That's a good word. That's a good
amazing.
place. Good acoustics in the bathroom. I
Absolutely.
still sing in the bathroom like all the time.
Yeah.
So we will, just for you, like you, as we talked about, you've been working in the field for almost 10 years now. You could kind of take me step into like before getting into the field. Yeah. Just a little bit about your background. We talked a little bit about your influence, like music wise, but yeah, just talk to me about your life, Will. I want to know more about you.
The short story or the long story?
Give it to me all, baby. Yeah.
I would say just sort of in a broad sense. I loved music in high school. It's kind of my it was my get-go. Went
Real
to
quickly,
college.
were mom and dad big musically, like influences all like?
Not really.
Yeah.
No.
Me
No.
too. Like I love music, but it was one of those things where my dad liked the Beatles and the Stones, but that was pretty much it. I felt like there wasn't that much music in the house. It wasn't until years later where I was like, oh, you listen to this or you listen to that. Like, kind of had to like develop it on my own, which I was a little resentful towards them for years. I'm like, you didn't point me in the right damn direction. But yeah, so there wasn't a lot of influence there, right?
No, I know my mom listened to some music, especially while driving. Some of my early memories of music is like, easy listening in the car. My mom's old Toyota Corolla. I think she sang a little bit. My grandmother had a piano,
wow.
but they didn't. And my dad had a guitar, but he never really played it. I don't remember them playing music. But I always loved it. And then in high school, it was sort of like sports music. I did football, but then I didn't do summer lifting. And then I was like, music. So I joined a band in high school. And we had some local success. We won a San Diego Music Award. We were called Jack's Broken Heart. We were in the emo vein.
Very cool.
Had some pretty good success, but we didn't have any management, and we kind of imploded, just being young kids with, facing, some success and then not being in agreement with the music direction of the band. And so then I built a home recording studio at my parents' house. I just loved music. I wanted to get into engineering. And in 2001, my parents' house in San Diego burned down in the big Cedar fires
Oh wow.
that happened in 2001. And that's kind of where my life shifted a little bit. I was going to college for film, actually, at San Diego State, and I dropped out, and I just was kind of in limbo, and it really displaced me. The whole house burned down, pretty much everything that I had. I literally escaped the house with just the clothes on my back
Wow.
and my car. I think I ripped my computer out of the wall and grabbed my guitar. Um, and so I guess the preceding maybe 8, 10 years, kind of just kept going to community college, started doing some drugs, started partying a little too much. Didn't realize that I had some PTSD that I didn't deal with, and got too heavy into drugs. Got
Mm.
heavy into opiates, heroin particularly. Um, and it lasted about 10 years. I mean, give or take. Um, and I managed to graduate film school from San Francisco State. Um, but I just was not happy. I was lost, um, pushing kind of music away in my life because, music tends to make us feel. And when I was really at my bottom, I didn't really want to feel. So,
Mm. I relate
uh,
with that a lot real quickly. I just want to say, like,
yeah,
I always joke with people, like, towards the end of my using, I was joking, like, I stopped listening to music altogether. It was like, I actually probably, I don't know if they were even podcasts at the time, but I would listen to, like, all talk, like, radio or whatever, like, nothing. Yeah, I couldn't feel anything anymore. So, like, and when I got sober, like, first, like, music I started listening to, I just remember how overjoyed and all the emotions, like, really came out. So I just wanted to say I relate with what you were saying right there a lot. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say around 2010, I had my first stint in a rehab. Was just kind of lost. I imagined like managed to graduate college, but I just didn't have much. Burned all my bridges. My parents were willing to help me out, but
Did you turn to
was
them for help at the time? Like, were you like,
no, my girlfriend at the time
okay,
ratted me out, which more power to her. But
yeah, yeah,
I wasn't ready, and I
right,
didn't
right.
realize it was gradual, right? I think over the course of about 10 years, looking back, I wouldn't say that I had like alcoholic tendencies from the get-go, right? It's just sort of I was introduced to opiates thinking it was opium, it was heroin, but I was like, opium, cool, Wild West, I kind of dibble dabble here and there, no big deal. And then it was like, before you know it,
Yeah,
it was weekends, and it was like, wait, I'm sweating, and I don't, I let me do it through the week, and
I'm your
you know,
Huckleberry. I gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, then all this stuff, all my stuff I pawned, and it was slow over
yeah,
10 years, like
yeah.
I said, but no, I went to rehab. It didn't really stick. Wasn't the right time. I actually ended up doing a treatment called EMDR, which you guys have probably heard of,
Hmm.
for PTSD, which I didn't realize that I had. But looking back, I couldn't talk about the fire in that evening without getting debilitated and overwhelmed, thinking about, what that was like. I mean, it was a very physically traumatic event. I mean, literally the black smoke engulfed the house, and the winds were 50 miles an hour. I had a friend in the backyard that was coming to help me evacuate, and we were yelling. It was right next to me, and he was like, I remember screaming at the top of my lungs, like trying to talk to him, and the wind was so loud and powerful that he couldn't hear me. Yeah, so I ended up doing EMDR. I was addicted to drugs at the time. The EMDR, I did 3 sessions, and it was incredible. I was able to go the third session and navigate the whole experience and sort of process and experience and grieve kind of that whole time of my life and what had happened up to that. So I always share that with my clients and my own experience, that I think it was, for me, it was personally really, really helpful, but I was still physically addicted to drugs, and that was hard to get off on my own. So the next couple years, I was living in LA, trying to work on film projects, freelancing, and just still doing drugs. And I couldn't physically stop, especially opiates. I just could
Right.
not do it. Tried Suboxone, tried IOPs, and I got arrested, passed out in my car, really my bottom, and got thrown in jail. Got the chance to go to rehab again. My dad was done with me and said, son, like pretty much I love you, but I can't have you in my life anymore. Created these boundaries, like, and it broke my heart, because I am close to my family. I've always had a great relationship. And I think that was the motivation to get me to take that step and to go to rehab. He wanted me to go to Salvation Army, and my dear mother found a rehab in Costa Mesa and actually had a music program,
Wow.
which was like, okay, I'll go. At least I get to do some music. And that sort of was the beginning of my recovery journey.
And you said that up at that point towards the end too, you weren't really dabbling in music anymore, right? Like you said, you kind of made it close that off. You weren't really feeling anything. You were pretty numbed out. But like, so going back
Absolutely.
into that program, into treatment, picking up that guitar, getting back into it, that was probably a new lifeblood for you in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Music
Yeah.
just started, as a musician, I thought, the idea of getting sober was that I was going to be missing out on
Yes. Yeah.
life, and I would, as a musician, wouldn't be inspired. I don't know, the
No.
misconceptions we have, right? You know,
Yeah,
um,
no, I mean, I don't know how many clients, I mean, younger clients, I'll hear them like they'll lose their creativity if they stop. Like, if I use drugs, I feel more creative. Like, I could write more, I could play better music. It's just that whole idea, yeah, that kind of, we feel like that's such a such a powerful influence and motivator that then before you know it, we're so lost in it and we've lost all that creativity as well. So,
right. It was
yeah.
actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Once, I got sober, my emotions just flooded back. I remember
Right.
laughing the hardest I had laughed in 10 years, just about something stupid with a group of guys sitting at a table. And music for me, I started being able to really focus on my intention of my music, right? What do I, honing in on my craft, but then I want to create a song. How's it making me feel? What do I want to express? And music got better for me. It was the opposite, So then I just kind of continued down that road. I switched up careers. I had a film degree because I wanted to do music for film,
Mhm.
and I knew music, so I had the film degree. But I decided to stay in Costa Mesa. I went to school for drug and alcohol counseling, so I did that. I got a job as a house manager and started working in the field.
Yeah.
And a couple of years later, I started working for another music company here in Costa Mesa, doing some music groups. And yeah, I'd say about 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to, create my own company. I have kind of my own method of the way that I run music groups and mental health and substance use disorder programs, and that's where I'm at,
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty
Um,
much.
you and I, we've talked about, we already kind of touched base on it, but for you, why do you think music is so important for those that struggle with addiction or mental health maybe early on? Why is that such a helpful motivator for people? Or just any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think for most people, music is really cathartic, and it's how we connect to our emotions. It's how we process emotions. Some people use music to move through their emotions, right? You're
Mhm.
sad, you vibe out in some sad music, and I personally think it helps you move through those, right? Part of
Yeah.
the human experience is having to feel the nature of trauma is suppressing those feelings and not moving through them. And I think music is one of the best catalysts for that and medium. And it's also just sometimes you don't know how you're feeling, but a song can help you identify that. That's what I fell in love with music personally, is that learning how to play an instrument and figure it out and sort of how understand how the music is making me feel in that creation. I was understanding myself. Um, And I think when it comes to music and the groups that I do and songwriting, right, therapeutic songwriting, is that the groups and the clients get to create, so it's not
Mhm.
just listening to music or, sharing music, which is therapeutic in itself, but it's in the
Yeah.
creation that they're expressing something and the authoring something, whether it's, about letting go, moving forward in the future. It's just, it's pretty amazing to see and witness, and surprisingly, a lot of people are musical. I believe that most beings are musical. It's innate. Just
Yeah.
like my son, who's not even two, he's going to be a drummer. And he sings and he dances, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's pretty special. I think music is really, no pun intended, but strikes a chord with
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
pun was intended.
It's a good pun. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Needed.
I wanted to
Yeah,
kind of, if we can go back a little bit, just because you mentioned
sure.
something about your process here with your recovery that I think it'd be important for just listeners to kind of understand a little bit. You talked about your parents putting up boundaries, or I think it was your dad with
Mhm.
you. I'm curious what you think about this. I feel like what you think boundaries. How do they fall in someone who is maybe struggling with substance use, even struggling with with mental health, and the families just like needing to disconnect? And do you feel like that's a helpful process, or unhelpful? Because I think there's a lot of different opinions around that, and sometimes we talk to clients, right? Our viewers are clients who just leave treatment, and some of them are leaving treatment feeling like, man, like my family has put up these boundaries, and I'm not allowed to be with them, or they're still mad at me, even though that I've put in this 30, 60, 90 days into treatment.
Right. I would say in my situation, I was manipulating my family for a long time. And so I think the boundary was healthy. It was that they didn't want to enable me anymore, but the love was still there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. And it's not like he cut me off and said, I'm done with you, right? But basically it was, you need to go get help, but I can't help you, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, so I think it's an effective tool. I think it's important to know when, a family member needs to say, "Hey, I won't enable you. You need to take this course on your own." But I can imagine as a father that that's got to be one of the hardest things my father ever did. I know my drug use gave him a stroke. Like he, thank God he recovered, but I can only imagine the anxiety and the stress that he had from me doing what I'm doing. But I don't know if he didn't draw that line, if I would have stopped. I mean,
Yeah.
that really it hurt me enough in to be effective for me to make a change.
Yeah.
mm,
So, but obviously, my situation was, mainly opiate addiction. But I think when it comes to mental health, and different diagnoses, I don't, it just depends on the boundary, right? I mean, I don't
yeah.
think cutting anybody out of your life is a good thing, but um, in my situation, I think it absolutely changed my course of action. Yeah,
Yeah.
Real quickly too, man. It's a new perspective for all of us in some ways because it's like, I mean, I hope I don't get to the point that, or with my daughter and my son, like I don't have to. This isn't the scenario. The same things that I put my mom through, but it's yeah. To make that for your dad to do that, it's powerful. And it was cool to hear that you actually said you still felt the love, though. You knew that there was still love there. And you actually, in some ways, even though maybe at times you didn't want to conform to it, you knew there was you were very manipulative and you were able to like take the help. Where some people, if you set a firm boundary with kids sometimes, or parents with kids, it's, they're just not ready, or they don't hear it, or maybe they don't see the love. So, it shines a new light on being a new parent for me, still a new parent for me, and maybe for all three of you guys. So.
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I I try not to think about it too much,
Well,
but
neither do I. Yeah, right.
it's like,
My kid's gonna be perfect.
yeah, the courage that my dad had, and
Right. Yeah.
they did work themselves. They saw therapists. They
That's great.
read
That's great.
about how to deal with a son with addiction. I don't, so I'm grateful and fortunate that they were willing to do what they could. But I can imagine when especially when someone's hurt, a parent's hurt, and then they don't have control of their child, then it's like, okay, well then they get angry and then cut them off, but then they think that's the right thing to do, and then it's just, and I think the worst fear would be is you cut them off and then they go and they die, right? And then
Yeah.
you have your guilt and that maybe you could have done something differently and was it because of you? I mean, I can't imagine going through that. It's
Yeah.
really, heavy stuff.
It's
Yeah.
really
You don't
hard
have
to.
to. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
hard, and it's like it's you know, there is, gosh, it's just crazy because there is no right thing to do almost, like, because you can't guarantee that depending on what you do, that the person is going to, go through treatment successfully because of what you did, right? And so I think it's a big thing to think about. If you're a family member or a friend of someone who's going through something, like, they're really, like, what you do should not be like, this is for them to get better. Like, the boundary should be about you, right? Like, this is for me to get some
Right.
space so that I don't hate my family member, or so that I don't, like, grow more resentful, or because I'm deteriorating, right? And having all these physical symptoms because I'm worrying so much. And I think a lot of times families have a hard time with that. But sort of, even when they do put boundaries, a lot of times it's with the expectation that now they're going to get better. you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what a hard thing to do is to let, someone's mental health or substance use like take its own course, if you love
Yeah.
them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, just a random thing is that like I don't think we've had a lot of guests on here. We've never had anybody be a house manager like we're on the show. Like just for anybody that's listening right now, what is a house manager? And like maybe just kind of explain like how you got into that position and what does that role even like entail? Because for maybe who's just common, somebody who's just listened to this, they're like, what the hell he manage? I mean, you would know what to manage a house, but you mean like a you would be a house manager at a sober living, right? So
You
like
do rental
what
properties or what?
Yeah. Yeah, it was so in early recovery, I was living in a sober living, and
yeah.
there were some guys that I knew that were opening a new program, and so they asked me if I would manage one of the houses. So basically, live in one of the houses and do UAs and make sure that the clients are doing what they're supposed to, transporting. So it's sort of a hybrid live-in house manager as well as operation staff,
Was
and
that position challenging for you being somebody that was still fairly new in recovery, maybe a couple of years, if that? Like was that like a hard role for you to take on?
yes and no. I think
Okay.
just like if somebody maintains a program of recovery, like maybe 12 steps or something, as they get sober, it sort of reminds you that, hey, this is where I came from, right? So I'd see clients come in that were just disheveled and just lost a lot. So in that sense, no, it was beneficial for me, but there were some challenges, defiant clients,
Right.
clients wanting to fight, stealing, I mean, some overdosing.
Yes. Yeah.
Fortunately, I never saw anything too crazy or no one pass away, but it got old pretty quick. I think it was a good stepping stone in my
Yeah.
recovery because I wanted to, stay work in the field. But once they put, the program I was working at, they were putting clients that probably needed a higher level of care, and I
Yeah.
was actually off. And then they put someone in my house and asked me to watch them, and they were talking about demons coming out of under the stairs or something, and sort of in a psychosis. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I know. Did you look back? That's good.
I did.
And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm ready,
Yeah.
and I got my own place, which was a huge step, you know, in my life, and just moving up. But it was a good stepping stone. But
That's good. Yeah, I mean, not here to talk negatively about sober livings. I think they're extremely important for like keeping accountability for clients that are motivated. And there could be challenges, just like anything. I just think a lot of times it's just so much to be thrown into. Like you're basically put in like somewhat of a, even though you're not clinical, it is a clinical role of like having to like manage these new people that a lot of times aren't highly motivated and they're still like they still have that wiggle room and it's a tough spot and a tough role. So
Yeah, and especially if I had 9 months in recovery, but I know
Yeah.
some programs they'll throw somebody as a house manager that's only got a couple months, and I think
Yeah.
that's a liability and a disservice to clients.
Yeah.
And what I I didn't share is I actually got into a sober living at 4 months in my recovery journey, and somebody who I went through treatment with had 5 months was the sober living manager, and they all relapsed, and that's actually the last time I relapsed because I was too new in recovery and I
Hmm.
knew my accountability was gone, which is what a
Yeah.
sober living provides. And I relapsed. And unfortunately
Yeah.
for me, I did enough work on myself that when I did use drugs that last time, it didn't do the same things for me. I
That's
didn't,
great.
as soon as I did them, it was like, it wasn't the same desired state that I wanted to be in. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these programs that I hear about, and some that I've worked for, they'll hire clients right out, actually some
Yeah.
places hire clients that are still in treatment, working in another place. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's a disservice to the clients. Granted, I think everybody in recovery deserves a shot. And I think working in recovery is a good road to take, but with the right steps and the right amount of time and really some good oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unfortunate that happens a lot in this
Yeah, it
field that
does.
I've
It
seen.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very like it's very scary to think about. Like, man, so someone who is barely working on themselves for a few months is now in charge of,
The
keeping
Yeah.
reason I
everybody
brought that up too
accountable.
was just that I remember working in the field, even running groups initially. That first like year for me, there was a lot of like I was still seeking like something like validation to so like running groups. I remember just the kinship, and I didn't really have like a healthy a program outside of like my job. So like for me, it was just like, yeah, it's just so there's so much like yeah counter transference or whatever. Like you just it's you're still learning so much about yourself, and it's just yeah, it could just I don't know. There's high risk everywhere. I think in early recovery, so
Yeah.
it's a tough role, and but yeah,
Yeah, just because somebody has experience doing drugs doesn't mean that now they should be managing people in a sober
right,
living. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
common. An addict will come out of rehab and be like, "I have so much experience to give." It's like,
Right.
Yeah.
well, but what is that really?
Right, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
So
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you mentioned this, but what led you to start getting into like music as a healing process? Like, how did you start coming across that?
Well, um, when I was a client in rehab in 2015, they had a music group, and I really resonated with it because I'm a musician. But I think just tracking back to my whole life as a musician, I always use music to heal, to sort of, and I still do. I write songs, and I as a dad, I don't really have time to do much music or play out, but I'll write a song or something will kind of sit with me in chords, and I'll process with it, and maybe I'll record it, maybe I won't. But I would say when I went through treatment and then I was working in as a sober living manager, and then I started facilitating groups. I started working for a music company in Costa Mesa that was doing music groups,
Yeah.
and that's sort of kind of where I got my start, and there was a lot of different experiential therapies, right? Equine therapy, breath works is a common one.
Yeah.
A lot of these programs use these adjunct services. And, I just really resonated with songwriting, with really
Yeah.
connecting with clients. I think that's something, one of the biggest gifts in my life is that I get to um, create with people and sort of help them connect with their emotions and what they want to say, and use music, and typically it's a new medium for them um, to do that, and to create, and it's just really gratifying and amazing to see how it really changes people,
Yeah.
and how they're so proud, and so like I created this, and this is really says what I've gone through or what I hope for, depending on the song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have awareness around like around it being healing then? Like during that first group that you took, like did you remember like if you were like, how is this gonna work, or were you kind of already like, oh, okay, this is going to really help me, or kind of what was your experience with that?
I mean, like I said, I always use music to express, and actually, coincidentally, I never. So I'm a singer-songwriter. I play drums, piano, but I started with guitar, and in my emo band, I was guitar, and I never really had the desire to sing. But after the night of the fire, looking back at sort of how I changed through my life experiences, I would say that trauma compelled me to express myself through song.
Mm,
And these lyrics actually popped into my head, which I had never written songs or really had a desire to write or sing because we had a singer, right? So I was a guitar player and this kind of a
Yeah.
songwriter.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was in the morning of the fire, he awoke in a dream. His still frame life had wiped itself clean. And it was just like, because we lost everything, photos, everything. And that was sort of these words that just came to me. And I think I sat on those words for like 8 years maybe, and
Wow.
I started writing songs, singing other stuff, and then I
Yeah.
started playing some really sad guitar song maybe in what was it, 20, maybe even 2015. It was years later that I was like, this is where I can put that. And I finally took those lyrics and created a whole song about that time in my life using that melody. So I think when I went to treatment, I knew that at least I was going to get to still the music because that was that one sort of thing holding me back from
yeah.
going to treatment was like, oh, I got all this stuff going on in my life. Really had nothing going on, but it was
Right.
like if I can't do music, and it was, yeah. And I just in that group, I was obviously a musician. I just music came out of me, and um, the group actually didn't have vocals. It was more of a kind of play drums and play guitar, and it was actually me. It was like, hey, bring a microphone. I got all these lyrics I want to like sing, and that's how the group kind of progressed. And then I ended up circling back about a year later and working for that company that had then developed, sort of a bigger program.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What's your
Um,
experience like? Go ahead, Jess.
no, you go. You go.
I was gonna say, what's your experience like now running groups? Like, do you find that like people in early recovery are open to doing something musically? I feel like I'm sure there can be a variety of like different attitudes
Populations,
around.
different.
Yeah, like even like attitudes or comfort levels around like
I
doing something like
real
this because you're
quickly
really vulnerable.
on top of that question too, like I was wondering if there's really any difference in like going to a mental health program in comparison to like a dual diagnosis, more like addiction heavy program. But anyways, go ahead, Manny. To your point, that
Yeah.
question. Go ahead.
Um, there's, I haven't noticed a difference too much
Okay.
in substance use, mental health. But usually people are like, "Who's this guy?" And we're gonna do some kumbaya, right? I have all these instruments,
Super
right? And it's
judgy,
like,
right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
What's
but
this different program here? This is I don't want any change, and now we're doing this weird music thing. What the hell, right?
yeah, it depends on the age too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you'd say
right.
the younger kids are like they're all about it. Older people depends on their propensity for music, but usually what happens is I think my ability to let the music kind of do the work, meaning I'll try to find, depending on the experience level in the group, find some music that resonates with them, right? So whether it's like a rap or whether it's some singer-songwriter guitar or some jazz piano, but allowing them to sort of take ownership of the song and then they start connecting to the music and they like it and it's not just something hokey but like something that sounds pretty good, then they invest, right? Then they
Yeah.
start saying, well, I could play that shaker. Oh, I could play the keyboard. Well, I like to write poems, so let me try to write, and so yeah, it's pretty incredible. I have like this modality that I developed, which is identify the intention, um, which is sort of what do we want to say? What is the song going to do? Do we want to get deep and like express how we have some guilt and shame and we're letting that go? Or do we want to maybe just laugh and create a story about a fly on the wall or write a song about bad drivers? I never come into a group with a song. Um, you know, I never have like any agenda other than I want the group to own the song. And if they want to write a silly song and just disconnect and laugh, then there's so much therapy in that, you know? And
Yeah.
then the next step would be to move the melody, which is let's use music. So is it going to be a happy melody, a sad melody? And that's where if nobody plays an instrument, I'll play some chords, I'll show them, give them some options, do a beat. I'll basically ask them, they're the producers. And then the next step would be create and connect, which would be now we just sort of get the music going and we try to cultivate as much content, whether we're doing lyrics together, gathering imagery or words, and then ready to record would be the last step in the group where we record the song. So we perform it and then record it, and then I provide a link on SoundCloud for the clients to have access. So yeah,
That's
it's pretty
amazing. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I would if if I was a client going into group for music, I would feel myself getting a little hesitant around like 'cause I feel like music is such a vulnerable experience,
Absolutely.
right? More than you can even. I mean, I don't know. For me, like, from a distance, it's like, oh yeah, I like to listen to music, but like to really like allow music to like enter, your mind, your soul, and to allow yourself to like talk about how it makes you feel and why you're listening to this right now. It kind of like that gets into a really deep and vulnerable process. So I
Yeah.
can imagine a lot of people in recovery like having to struggle with that vulnerability. But if you can come at it with a good direction, then yeah, you're probably processing some really important stuff.
Yeah, I got a lot of icebreakers, a lot of jokes. You know, one of my biggest things is just to establish rapport in the beginning, that there's no pressure, right? My number one rule for my group is to give no fucks, part of my language, but I mean that's the one rule, right?
Yeah.
And then if, like I said, if I put on like a rap, like it's maybe somebody wants to do a rap or a group, and I put on like a pretty good beat, it's like then they're like, wait, this isn't hokey. I like this music. Let me try to. This guy is making this process easy for me to participate. Um, it usually works out, but there's also the groups where everybody's like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to feel
Right.
or they're pissed off at the place. Usually that's what it is. They're like, screw this rehab.
Yeah.
Like they don't, they're not doing this. And I've had some of my best sessions in rehabs that were not great, like at all. And I just, and part of me too is that conflict that, should I be even going to this facility knowing that it's not a great facility, but I'm bringing music to these clients that are, need it,
Yeah.
but you could tell that this place is just, they just don't have the staff that they need, and the clients are not receiving the care, and they're just funneling them in, and it's
Yeah.
pretty disturbing to see. But at the end of the day, they're there to get help, and I can show up and I can provide some music for them to help them create and have some hope. And yeah.
I can picture like a mad group right now, right, where they're just pissed off and it's like one, nothing wrong with me. Two, nothing wrong with me.
Yeah, yeah. I
Just
guess my
going
one
off
rule
there.
is
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
No drowning
sometimes
pool.
sometimes they want to actually just write a song about the rehab, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if we could do it kind of like funny, but I don't want you
Yeah.
talking shit about the rehab because I work for the rehab.
That paycheck might not come.
Yeah. They'll
Yeah.
walk there and be like, fuck
But
Jesse,
I
yo,
want
he's
them to
the
use the group if
worst.
they're
What?
pissed off. I'll do a heavy song like,
Yeah.
Scream, right? Or whatever. It's a
Yeah.
release,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a release for sure.
I've
So,
I've had I've had clients before where they've just had this depressed demeanor, right? And it's just like um they'll listen to really sad music all the time, and there's a part of me that like I want them to have that space to process the sadness and the emotions, and they probably will be sadder than maybe a different person, right? Because they just have that predisposition to be sad and feel sad. But then there's times where I'm like I challenge them on the idea of like why do we always listen to sad music? I'm like, can we change it up, right? And kind of because some of this might be making you even more depressed, you know what I mean, than you
Right,
already are. So
brooding.
yeah, so it's like really like in my mind there's a balance of like being able to have space for sadness, but then like is music, sad music, depressed music, is it almost damaging you a little bit too if it's like on the far end of the spectrum. Then what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Can I say something real quick? I would say, we talked about this a little bit early on. Music, a lot of times for me, helped me get to certain emotions I was very uncomfortable with. So my process is even still. Sometimes I know I'll be stuck. Maybe I just need a good cry. I know I'm on the cusp of it. I know there are certain songs or certain music I can go to, and it helps me kind of get to that next level. So like, to your point, I can most definitely see how sometimes I know some clients will listen to certain I'll just reference like certain hip hop music where it's just like it takes them back to their certain lifestyle and they're like romanticizing that time in their life and that type of music. I'm like, maybe we should try to cut out that a little bit and move towards something else. It's a little more progressive. That's going to help you heal and be healthy. With the sad stuff though, yeah, I mean, should there be a balance? I can't just listen to The Cure all the time, but like there are times where I'm just going to be like, yeah, I mean, like, maybe I need to like kind of change my attitude a little bit. But the sad stuff to me is for me at least, my process. It's very reflective, and it can be very, for the most part, I think, healthy. Will, any thoughts for you on that? Like,
I would agree with you. I'd
yeah,
say, sure, you don't want somebody to be stuck on repeat, right? Just sort of like
yeah,
brooding. But I think if somebody is listening to music and it's a tool they're using, that it's okay if it's sad, um, even a lot, because that's what they're connecting with,
yeah, yeah,
and music can be used to regulate or change how you feel, but commonly I don't think people do that. I mean, some do, but I think it's more common that they, listen to music that really resonates with how they're feeling. To your point, yeah, the music that just has no substance, that glorifies stuff, drugs and objectifies women, I'm like, that's just, I don't connect with it. It's just
yeah,
it's sometimes that's a struggle in my groups, because especially like adolescents, they'll say, well, that's what music is, and it's like, no, it's not. Music is expression. But I can kind of navigate that. But I will say personally, for me, there was a song when I wasn't listening to music at all, wasn't making music. There was one song in particular that I found that was probably one of the saddest songs I had heard, and I listened to it over. And I just remember being in my car and crying and listening to that song over and over and over and over and over again. And still, when I hear it to this day, I get emotional recall. That's the power of music. It's a
yeah,
phenomenon that happens with senses, sight, smells, but sound. It invokes that, and I'll still like, and I don't listen to it that much anymore because it really takes me back. But it just shows the power that music has for us, especially attached to memories and emotions.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep. I can hear Tracy Chapman, Fast Car, and it
yeah,
takes me back to, it's like it turns on a certain time in my life with my family and like, yeah, I've done like music groups where we just like play music and I have them identify certain feelings and emotion, do this like experiment. But when somebody picks that song, I'll try to like hide out in the cut because I'm like, I don't want to like, I'm feeling it. It's coming up for me, but it's
yeah,
healthy though. I think for the most part, I think it's a healthy process now. So.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Will, we talked a little bit off record, and I was kind of curious, just because I think there's a bit of a stigma about like recovery sometimes. If you'd want to like talk about this a little bit, you could. If not, we can cut this shit right now. But like,
No, let's talk about it.
but we talked about sobriety. I think I mean, there's stigma about addicts and alcoholics, but there's also a strong stigma on what recovery is supposed to look like. For you, in a lot of ways, your recovery journey, it is a little different than maybe what we're told to the first time we walk into a treatment program for 30 days. And there's a reason why, because we don't want to like give people, maybe we want to maybe more direct with the cause initially. But for you, when I say sobriety or recovery, what does that look like for you?
So, the way I share it and the way, I view my journey is that I am in recovery from opiate addiction.
Yeah.
And in my journey, I went through rehab. I abstained from all drugs and alcohol for quite a while, over 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think doing the EMDR therapy for me in particular, and doing therapy in my recovery journey and after, I identified that a lot of my addiction was symptomatic of my trauma.
Yeah.
And so starting to work in the field, it was like, you go to rehab and they're like, oh, you got to go to AA,
Yes.
you never do drugs or drink again. It's like, that is just sort of what most of these programs will say. And I think that it's a good thing, but it's also, to be truthful with the person to say, hey, it's your choice if you want to reassess your life. Obviously, you're in rehab, you have issues that you need to work on. Every person is different, right? Everybody, has a different story, right? And in my journey, I, started coming to the realization that in reflection, that I didn't think I had a problem drinking alcohol. Sure, I would drink a bottle until I pass out if I didn't have my drug of choice. I was going
Yeah.
to detox, right? And, um, I started doing a lot of different drugs in the end. It really didn't matter what it was. So I was kind of scared to sort of like, I guess, test the waters and say, hey,
Yeah.
should I drink? Like, my life is amazing
Right.
in recovery. Do I need to? And I think just, speaking with my therapist and really reflecting on myself and where I was, I came to my truth that like I think I can introduce alcohol into my life responsibly. And I have. And I noticed that when I drink couple drinks, I get to a point where it's like I don't want to be in a state of oblivion of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't share that often with clients.
Right.
I think there's because I had to abstain. I had to do a lot of work in my life spiritually. Um, doing the therapy EMDR, got out of an unhealthy relationship. And I don't want, like you had mentioned, clients to romanticize. Maybe I'll drink or smoking weed, right? We're talking about rehabs that you can still
Yeah.
smoke weed. I don't think
Right.
that works. I don't think you're not going to get the help and really sort out the things. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, right? About weed and the benefits versus the negative effects. But
Yeah.
I think everybody has their journey, and unfortunately, we sort of have to self-diagnose, right? I mean, obviously there are
Mhm.
tests you can, you know,
Yeah.
diagnose, but that was my journey, and yeah, it's sort of like a big nightmare that I had for 10 years of my my life,
Right.
and
Yeah.
um, but I wouldn't be here today having, the life, the gift that I get to do with music, having my son, and having the life had I not taken those steps to enter recovery and to abstain for quite some time and work on
Yeah.
myself. Weed, I can't do it, won't do it. Other illicit drugs, no, no desire, no
Yeah.
interest. Glass of wine with dinner, sure,
Yeah.
a couple drinks here and there, but it's like that sort of, I think, like I said, in my journey
Works.
was
Right.
that's that's what I had to do, but
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's journey is different. And it's again, I don't it's interesting. I don't know if it's that stigma that when you go to rehab, it's like you're going to AA and this is like, you gotta, if you cross addict or you take another drug, or there's also sex and love, there's a lot of different addictions, but
Hmm.
it's definitely a stigma that but there are many ways to the top of the recovery mountain, right? And
Yeah.
so in my
Yeah.
eyes, I recovered and I'm in recovery, but I don't claim to be sober,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sober, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's just very brave to talk about, and I know people that do that as well. That and it's just seen so negatively, which I understand to a point. But I think it's important when I talk to clients, I don't when I tell them more than anything, like if they ever reach out to me, I say, I just, sober or not, I say this and I'm like, just let me know where you're at life because I work with so many young people, and to say at 20 or 19, I'm like, this is the rest of your life, and this is how it's going to be. I wouldn't dare say that to them. Like,
Sure.
it also would be, I could I have to be careful though, because I also can't be like, listen, maybe in 5 years you should have a drink. I wouldn't dare say
Right,
that. But
right.
like, I realize like I'm talking to somebody who's 19 years old who could have their life completely in front of them. So just the idea of like, look at your life and see what works and see what doesn't. Yeah, and of course there's always that fear of like if they have this drink and they drive, they die, or if they use this substance and overdose, they die. Yes, it's It's all these things that people are very scared of and have reasons to be scared of. But you really gave a good like I think just the way that you went through your life and really like you talked to healthy people and you tried different things and you did the work. So it's encouraging to hear you share that. So I appreciate you putting it out there like that. So
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you. Yeah,
part of
it's oh,
the dominant discourse out there around recovery is the AA model, right? And then I don't know if you guys have seen what's that video that is super popular, Pleasure Unwoven, right? Where the
yep.
guy kind of talks about how the disease model around addiction, right? That like if you are an addict, then you have a disease, and the disease is not being able to handle any controlled substances that mess with the that cross the blood brain barrier. And he kind of breaks down very scientifically, better than I can ever do in this podcast. But that's the dominant discourse I think out there, and but there is a lot of people that do eventually figure out how to handle substances, and I think every substance is different, right? Alcohol is one thing. I mean, you're talking about stronger substances. I don't know that I've known anybody that can moderate strong substances like
Yeah.
opiates or
classy
Or
heroin
meth.
methamphetamine,
users,
Or
right?
right?
Yeah,
meth.
yeah.
Yeah, classy meth. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
yeah. So, but I mean,
Have you ever
there's people
tried
that take
classy meth? That's
Adderall.
that's good stuff
Adderall.
on them. Yeah, yeah. That's right. There you go. Yeah.
Adderall is classy meth.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but there is like yeah, there is balance that you can find in life, right? And I think even I don't know how many years did you say you had in recovery?
Over 10.
Over
Yeah,
10. I
over
imagine even
10.
when you drink, I imagine like you're still like assessing just kind of where you're at mentally and emotionally. Maybe I don't know if you do that. I mean, I'm not in recovery, but I know I do. Like when I'm drinking, I'm like, like what is this gonna do for me? How is this something that I should get into based on where I'm at emotionally, mentally, or how do I feel, right? And I take that to consideration when I'm partaking in alcohol.
Yeah, for me, typically it's just in, social situations, and I definitely don't. I have healthy coping skills right now,
Yeah.
right? And I sort of worked on that time of my life. I mean, that fire and that event was definitely the catalyst for my addiction, and so um, yeah, it's never like, oh, I'm sad, I want to have a couple drinks, and you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I have learned to use music and learn to communicate with my family and loved ones, and that it's just not a coping mechanism that
Yeah.
I even think about. You know what I
That's
mean?
great. That's
And
great.
what's interesting too is I've actually had some, health issues. I got a pacemaker and I've had some other issues that I've been prescribed opiates. And that was sort of like, well, wait, like, and I remember, I think I was actually still in the period where I wasn't drinking, is, the first couple of years of my recovery, and I had gallstones and I was in the hospital and I had a Dilaudid drip. And I remember my parents were there and I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is what this drug is for because it took the pain away. But
Yeah.
I also remember like not liking where my head was at in my headspace. And so that sort of was probably one of the indicators too that it was like, hey, I really did this work on myself, that it's not a desired state that I want to be in. I've sort
Yeah.
of, grew spiritually and emotionally. And but yeah, it's I think some from coming from those things in my life where I did turn to a drug to cope, I definitely am mindful and will be mindful in my life when major events happen, right? Parents dying, right? Death of somebody that
Yeah.
I don't go down that hole, but I can safely say, that it's not a coping skill for me at this,
Mm,
time of my life,
yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think you're a person that tends to like, well, I do this. I just feel like I'll reassess parts of my life and like, um, yeah, just thanks for sharing that. And,
Yeah, man. Thank you.
yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Manny, anything else you want to bring up with Will besides this thing? We're going to talk about this in about a second right here.
No, man. I guess one thing that would be cool is just to like any I guess if there was anyone who is listening and wanting to use music more as a way to process their emotions or get in touch more with their emotions. Um, I know what would you maybe someone who's not as music savvy, right? But like, what would you recommend they do to get to start that process for them?
I would say anybody that loves music to try to learn an instrument and to, whether it's a ukulele or a guitar. Like I said, I think most people are musical, and it is such a good grounding um, skill and just coping mechanism that, like, to spend time, right? Especially somebody in early recovery, right? Like, I had to find new ways to live my life and reconnect with the things I love, right? I got back into fishing in early recovery and obviously music, but I think recovery isn't just not doing drugs, it's finding joy and love in life again and connecting. And I think
Yeah.
learning an instrument is a great way to do that for somebody that loves music, and it's not hard to do with YouTube University. I mean, you can just watch a video and learn an instrument. Yeah.
Amazing,
Ma- Manny,
amazing.
what are you gonna pick up now? What are you gonna?
Me,
Yeah. Don't say the
saxophone,
recorder.
the
Saxophone. Okay,
saxophone.
I can see
Sax.
it.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. All
Well,
right. Will, I did want to, you were like, you're so humble. You're like, I don't want to bring in the book. And maybe it's not really for this type of podcast, but like, I think your journey speaks a lot of just like who you are then and who you are now, and husband, father, all those things. Like, and then in a lot of ways, I think that you writing this book is kind of just almost setting the stage for like connection early on, because music is huge. I think it's so important. But the Boogie Barn Band, you put this out here last year in 2024, right?
yeah.
Just talk about just, I mean, I know you talked about working with your partner on the book, but what was like initially, like, what was the motivation? What was the purpose of like, hey, I want to do something like this?
I think knowing that my son was going to be born, and
Yeah,
then working with my wife, and she has a speech clinic, right? And so
cool.
they have a board certified music therapist, and her therapist just plays a lot of nursery rhymes and uses music for kids with developmental disabilities. And so I connected with her to start writing some original music. And I never really, I love writing songs. I just never
Yeah,
thought, oh, writing kids songs would be fun, because you think kids music is just kind of boring or
right.
just cheesy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But I think knowing that I was going to have a son or child at the time, that I was more, it sparked my interests, and I started writing some kids songs, and then sort of creating this world, right? Because a lot of kids music, or even stories, or even educational stuff, is farm based. So I mean, started thinking about just this farm, and then having animals. And I'm a filmmaker too, right? So I
yeah,
just sort of
yeah,
like, I just ran with it and created these characters, this band of musician farm animals, and then using each animal as a genre of music. Like Rocky the Bull's rock and roll looks like Elvis, and then my wife, being a speech therapist, we, combined having clinical intention with songs, um, to help kids, because music is a great conduit for learning, right? Especially early learning, basic concepts. And so that's kind of how it started. And I'm super excited about it. Being a new father, it's hard to kind of get off the ground, and advertise and market. But we have some puppets being made, because I was
yeah.
big into Muppets and, Sesame Street and all that.
Nice.
And I mean, you took your little one to one of our shows, but we have the music. We started with a book. I'd love it to be a show, maybe live action, but it's just amazing to see kids, especially seeing my son, just seeing kids, how they love music and
Yeah.
puppets, right? And how they connect. It's such an amazing thing to see their imagination sort of flourish, and it just yeah, so I'm excited about it. But yeah, it's on Amazon, the Boogie Barn Band. We have a website, and like I said, we have some puppets being made. I'm pretty excited about, and
It's cool, man.
we're gonna try to do some local shows for the kids and see what happens. Yeah,
It's
Amazing.
awesome, man. That's so
yeah.
cool.
Awesome. Well, Jesse, anything else we got here before we wrap this
Oh
up?
man, just thank you so much. Will, it's yeah, you're just a good man. So I appreciate you. So
Thank you. Thanks,
yeah.
guys, for having me on.
That means a
Yeah.
lot. That means a lot coming from Jesse. He talks
I don't
shit
like
about a
people.
lot
That's
of
right.
people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome,
I,
man.
I just,
Well,
I real quickly, I know it's like I can just see the look in Will's eyes of just like there's a lot, there's going to be a lot of progress with the Boogie Barn Band book, but like you're like as a parent, you're just like, where can I put my energy today? So it's
Yeah,
just like,
that's exactly.
my
yeah.
gosh, dude, it's the best thing in the world, but man, it's fucking exhausting. So
Yeah, I love it though. So,
yeah, I know.
never had so much love. Never
Yeah,
knew I could experience so much love,
right. Yeah.
You guys
So
know.
I agree. I agree.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we want to remind you guys to, if you guys have any questions for Will, you can send them in as well. And just
What
remember to
about
put some
moving melodies? Is there anything like sorry, man, like, moving melodies? Is there anywhere like does anybody like how would we get a hold of you to like get your program in? Like how does that work? Do you have a website for moving melodies?
I do, yeah. I have a website. It's wearemovingmelodies.com,
Cool.
and it just gives information about the music groups that we do. And right now it's just me. I mean, I don't have,
Yeah.
employees or anything, but it's
Right,
yeah,
right.
if anybody's interested in groups, obviously with my son right now it's limited time, but as
Yeah.
he starts to go to school, I have a little more time. But yeah, we are movingmelodies.com.
Merch on the way too, right? So
There you go.
What's that?
merch on the way, I said,
Yeah,
right?
merch. Yeah, yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Add it to the list.
That's right. If you have the time, yeah, yeah. So
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse
Thanks,
O,
guys.
sign us off, bro.
As always, check in on your friends.
Forgot my name, tag it home today. I'm Jack. Greet you like I give a fuck. Are you surprised by that?